In today's show, you'll hear investor perspectives on the COVID-19 impact on the cannabis market. This is Investor Perspectives. I'm the host of Investor Connect, Hall T. Martin, where we connect startups and investors for funding. It's the time of COVID-19. Cannabis is currently gaining regulatory approval across the U.S. The lockdown has declared certain sectors, including cannabis, to be an essential service. We have investors and startup founders describe the impact of COVID-19 on the cannabis market. I hope you enjoy this episode. My first guest is Tibby Erdely of Key Investment Partners. Sure. So we recently went through a lockdown related to COVID-19, and so we saw an acceleration of the cannabis sector along with others that were deemed essential services. Can you tell us a little bit about what you think the impact of COVID-19 was on the cannabis sector?
Yeah, absolutely. There's quite a few different ways to take this conversation. So I'll start at the high, from a high level, no pun intended, and happy to dive into whatever you'd like to there. So I would say, if we took a step back 3 months ago when this was all starting to go down, it was an interesting time, especially for us being in cannabis fund in the space, to see what was going to happen. We certainly saw the capital markets drying up quite a bit broadly across the economy, not just in cannabis, but cannabis has been, one of those industries that's been a little bit tougher to fundraise for, if you will, in the past. And so 3 months ago, we were saying, okay, what's going to happen here? Fast forward a little bit, cannabis businesses were deemed essential in virtually every state where it's legal. So number one, I think that's a huge testament to the industry going much more mainstream. What we saw is that we saw not only a spike in increase of sales of cannabis, and we believe that that's going to be driven, or that was driven by not only consumers increasing their basket size and how much cannabis they're purchasing as they were really looking to kind of stock the pantry and get ready for the lockdown in place measures, but data suggests that you also had a lot of new entrants into the industry as well. And I believe that it is a testament to cannabis being deemed essential, being put alongside with liquor stores, pharmacies, grocery stores, you name it. It really did kind of a big service to the industry there. There's also a narrative that's starting to emerge that you may have heard as well, that this could likely increase the pace at which states legalize cannabis. So you've seen legislators across the United States kind of really go out of their way to ensure that, consumers have access to the cannabis that they're seeking. So some things that have really changed in the industry rather quickly is relaxed laws towards how you can actually acquire and pick up your cannabis. So you're seeing a pretty large, significant shift towards e-commerce, a large shift towards delivery and other technology-enabled ways for consumers to access cannabis. So B2C marketplaces, more sophisticated point-of-sale systems coming in, looking for easier ways to transact without using cash, so cashless payment options. But quite a few things that have been kind of hurdles over the past few years in the cannabis industry were quickly, the red tape, if you will, was quickly removed so that the consumer could access cannabis. So we've got an increase in sales in cannabis. You've got a narrative emerging that states will likely increase the pace at which they legalize cannabis, whether it's states looking to go from medical to adult use or just legalizing medical for the first time, really as a means to make up for loss in tax revenue. And frankly, what we've seen is that this has really reignited a lot of investor appetite again in the space. The cannabis industry, if you will, has been pretty red hot kind of valuation or cap markets environment back in 2017, 2018. A lot of companies going out there raising a lot of capital. We saw a lot of the publicly traded companies trading at valuations that were frankly unjustified. A lot of those valuations came back down to earth at the end of last year. With the impact of COVID, you're starting to see that happen again. And what you're starting to see is an environment where cash is truly king today. And that, I think, has really done it's done a whole lot for getting investor appetite reignited into the space to go out there and take a look at an industry that is growing and, due to the pandemic-induced recession that we find ourselves in, is finding itself as a new investable asset class for investors that have maybe been on the sidelines before. So a reignited interest, if you will, has sparked, no pun intended, over the past few months.
My next guest is Kim Rail of Azuka. Well, we've just gone through the COVID-19 pandemic and many things changed and many things accelerated, including cannabis. But can you talk a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 on the cannabis market?
Sure. So I think COVID has really been an accelerant in some ways to the cannabis market, the emerging cannabis market. It's still obviously a very, both CBD and THC, nascent market in the US and varies from state to state. What COVID did at a fundamental level is in most states, cannabis was deemed an essential business, really highlighting that both adult use customers and especially medical patients were deemed to have a right to access their cannabis products. So I think that really was a moment which kind of highlighted the importance of this emerging industry.
My next guest is Scott Griper of Viridian Capital. Hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Scott Griper of Viridian Capital. Scott, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Hall. Good to be with you.
So COVID-19 recently came through and changed our lives in significant ways and accelerated many things. And one of them was the cannabis sector. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 on cannabis in general?
Sure. Well, it certainly wasn't good in the month of March of this year. We look back in the Viridian Cannabis Deal Tracker, which is our data analytics service that measures all of the investment and M&A activity in the cannabis industry. And if you look at the month of March, and we did the month of March, Hall, because that's really the first month that the virus impacted the U.S. stay-at-home orders, shutdowns, economic impact. And if you look in terms of the month-over-month investment activity, so from February to March of 2002, the number of investments was down 38%. The total amount of dollars raised was down 69%. And the average raise, the average size of each investment tranche was down 57%. So that's from February to March. So pretty clear that the impact was quite negative. Thank God it recovered quite strongly in the following months, but that first month of March was pretty significantly impacted month over month. And if you look year over year, so March 2019 to March 2020, similar negative impact. Number of capital raised, investments, placements, down 46%. The total amount of capital raised, down almost 60%. And the average raise, down almost 28%. Clearly a negative impact.
And my next guest is Ryan Dean Hogan of Moda Ventures. Great. I want to thank you for coming on the show. And as you know, we've all just gone through the lockdown and the pandemic that is COVID these days. I'd like to discuss, the impact on cannabis from that experience and get your perspective on it as well. And so maybe we can start off with that. What do you see as the challenge of COVID-19 or the benefit of COVID-19 on the cannabis industry?
Well, I think there's been many challenges, but whenever there's challenges, there's always opportunities going forward. I never would have expected, and I took the role of CEO of Moda Ventures, although I've been in the CBD and e-commerce space since 2014. I would have never guessed when I took the role at the end of February that we would go through what we did in March and then through Q2. And it really, I'm sure you talk to a lot of CEOs. We're still going through it, and we're seeing things really change in real time with the metrics of the business. So our business, we're 100% CBD online e-commerce resellers. And the biggest thing that we realized during the time period, starting in really mid-March, and that was that buyer behavior began to move in directions that we've never seen before in e-commerce. And we were luckily able to keep operating, keep our supply chain moving to a point where we were able to innovate quickly on demand. In e-commerce, because we're not a cultivator, we're not an extractor, we're taking finished product and then we're delivering it to the end user. We're able to really get some of that immediate feedback and then create different product SKUs, different marketing campaigns. So our business, we were really, really strategically positioned. Obviously, we didn't enjoy going through what we did, but we were very strategically positioned to make changes to the business where I think a lot of other CBD and cannabis companies didn't have that luxury.
My next guest is Ford Smith of Ultra Native. We just went through the pandemic of COVID-19 and various states of lockdown and reopening, and wanted to take a step back and get your perspective on how do you think COVID-19 impacted the cannabis sector?
As far as a capital raising narrative goes, things really seemed to dry up right around when this kind of first big wave hit the States. I know that a lot of people were out raising capital at the time. And, for a good 60 days, it really all froze, kind of dried up. Just like most other sectors, most investors were kind of looking to see what was going to happen. I'd say for the first 30 days, things kind of froze. So all of a sudden, brick and mortar was shut down. The dispensaries started taking a real hit. And direct-to-consumer businesses like Ease just started seeing astronomical growth. People, that first kind of week of the wave, people kind of got, super worried about what was going to happen and ended up going, and stocking up on cannabis, just like toilet paper. And so it was an unprecedented opportunity, I think, for companies that had a direct-to-consumer model to really go capitalize on what was happening. Being deemed an essential business in the state of California was massive for those types of companies. I think it was massive actually just for the cannabis movement as a whole. It was finally at this point that you had state regulators, coming out and legitimizing cannabis as more or less a nutraceutical or a medicine. So yeah, I'd say that some companies obviously definitely took a hit. A lot of the dispensaries, the brick and mortar groups, but really the direct to consumer is what it really just began to thrive and it's continued to kind of stay on that uphill trajectory.
Thank you for joining us today. As always, be sure to leave a review, subscribe to this podcast, and share it with others. Let's go start up something today. Halti Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for the basis of investment decisions.